we judge people on the wrong reasons. So we don't have a prediction of future job performance. This whole topic about high performing teams, a lot of times people forget about the connection with psychological safety and high performance. Let's just identify what are the kind of skills, what are the kind of leaders we actually need to establish such a culture. We take away a lot of things that they're used to in order to judge talent, and it needs a lot of preparation as well. Okay, if people fail but are willing to learn, then we do additional coaching sessions to get that person there.
Hello, Matthias. Welcome to Hiring on All Cylinders. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you, Chris?
Yeah, I'm good. It's hump day and I'm looking forward to the rest of the week. And I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while now because it's a topic that a lot of people are talking about, skills-based hiring and how that can really transform hiring for businesses and bringing in kind of better talent. And I know you're really passionate about this subject and it's something that you're very close to at the moment. So I guess I wanted to get your point of view really on why do you think skills-based hiring can be a powerful tool and what problem is it solving for companies?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think skill-based hiring is something that we are trying to use to actually get better talent, hire better quality talent. So this whole topic that we have seen now in the market that do more with less and you need to increase the quality per hire is literally one key answer to this. And there are even more reasons for this. I think I'm at the moment in a startup Series B, 50 million euros investment, deep tech company in Berlin. And we are globally, we're operating on a global scale. So we have people in the US, we have people in Latin America, in Europe. And what we keep on seeing is that we judge people on the wrong reasons. So we don't have a prediction of future job performance. That is something we don't do so good in our hiring processes. So what do I mean by that is, you probably know this, and a lot of recruiters have been confronted with this, is, you do this pedigree recruiting. Yeah. So you have people who say, oh, they need to have a certain degree, or they need to have a certain industry experience, or they need to work from a certain company or competitor. Even sometimes with a year of experience, how much does it really correlate to be successful in the job? And so we have seen all of those topics that made us hire maybe not the right people for the right roles, right? And on top of that, you have the need that even nowadays, with all the layoffs and organizations struggling, you still have a hard time to hire the best talents, right? It's still a competition out there, yeah? Even if those talents might not have as much choices as they had a couple of years ago. So it's really on this understanding and how to have this mindset of what is actually the key skills that a person needs on their first day to be successful in their job. And it's not the obvious reasons, right? It's not the reasons also when we talk about resumes. Why would we even consider resumes to be part of that decision-making process? And for us as TA people, we do this in the application review stage, right? We will look at resumes and then make a decision, do we talk to that person or not? And is that even a qualified decision? Is that even an objective or evidence-based decision? It's not. And that is where we want to tackle this a little bit in a better way.
Awesome. So I think what you're saying makes total reasonable and logical sense. But as you know, like not a lot of companies do this and, they don't have a very objective hiring process. It is very driven around pedigree and kind of pattern matching. What can a company do in terms of taking the first steps to implementing skills-based hiring in their organization? And what do you think some really impactful things can be to get this going in your business?
Yeah, I think the first thing that sometimes we forget is understanding the status quo of your organization. Yeah, what are the core problems at the minute? So what we did, we called it P&O talks, which literally was we get from the VPs and the C-level feedback on how people perform. Yeah, but this was just a top-down kind of feedback approach, and then we just talked to all of the people in the organization and just said, look, what does it hinder you to be better in what you do, right? What are our blockers here? What do we need to do in order for the company to succeed and reach our targets? And what we discovered are a couple of things that are actually blockers and that we want to get rid of. So, for example, this whole topic about high performing teams, a lot of times people forget about the connection with psychological safety and high performance. Yeah. So, Google did the research there. There are a lot of other books out there who claim to say a successful team needs a psychological safe environment, yeah, in order to make mistakes, make failures. And now a lot of people might ask, so what has that to do with skills, right? And yes, well, let's just identify what are the kind of skills, what are the kind of leaders we actually need to establish such a culture, such a psychological safe culture. And then you will see that, for example, the resilience piece, right? How do you deal with changes? It's a changing world, it's a changing atmosphere, and organizations change as well. Every investment round that you have in startups, you kind of need different people. Yeah, and for this is something where we want to identify and say, look, we have a DNA that was in the past a little bit more behavior driven. Yeah, so what kind of behaviors do we want to see in an organization to succeed? And then we translated this into skills. And what that meant is then to say, look, how do people have a certain resilience is one skill we looked at. When we had critical thinking, adaptability. Yeah. So really trying to bring this down in order to tackle topics that create this opportunity for us to create a psychological safe space, but also look at leaderships. Like what kind of leadership principles, what kind of leadership skills that everybody needs to have. So it's compassion, yeah. It's also change management, strategic thinking. And then if you define this for the org, what it does then for you when you start hiring for a role, ask in the intake meeting the leader to say, look, what are the 10 skills that maybe an individual contributor needs to have to get or to be successful in their first day? Yeah. And probably a couple of them are your company skills, your DNA skills, and then a couple are technical skills. And where this gets really messy is that probably a lot of hiring managers say, Matthias, I have my 15 skills that I need just for the technical side, for my functional side. And that is too much, right? Because we need to really nail this down into what are the top 4 skills that you actually look for? What is important for you? And for a lot of hiring managers, this also means, what are my skill gap analysis? Yeah, when I come in, when I work in a team, what are the gaps that I need to close to make that team more successful? And this is sometimes done because managers say, look, these are people who want to develop in that direction and they close skill gaps for me. These are, so through learning and internal mobility maybe, but then there are others where I don't find anyone in the team that wants to close that gap. And that's then maybe the opportunity where you want to hire.
Yeah. And so when you're creating these kind of rubrics for, what it means to be successful in your organization, I'm guessing this is going to be different for every single organization. You're creating kind of a top level set of behaviors or competencies, which are based around kind of the company. And then you're having more specific, granular, that are based more on the role itself, that are more technical. Is that correct?
Yes. So ideally, you have the DNAs and the leadership that are unique to everyone. And then the functional skills or technical skills, however you want to call it, that depends then very much on the role. And then you would probably create a skill taxonomy that you have with 70, 80, 90 skills that you have in your organization. And then based on the role, you can really navigate and say, okay, let's just do this with hiring, but then also let's just do this with internal people as well. So you need to have a kind of a system where this is all aligned in order to then, and this is maybe a challenge that we as TA people don't talk about so much, is skill-based hiring is nice, but if the organization doesn't translate or transform to a skill-led organization, which is a skill-based career framework, skill-based compensation, skill-based career paths as well, if you have this system and it's uniquely done, then you can move people internally and you don't look at resumes, or you have a skill management tool that allows you to say, look, we have certain projects in the organization, we need the right skills in those projects, and then you can tie them and match them better.
Talentful provides flexible recruiting solutions to the world's most ambitious companies. Are you thinking about ways to add flexibility to your talent function? With recent market volatility and hiring set to return to growth mode in the near future, there's never been a better time to choose the right partner to help you scale. Talentful's embedded sourcing, recruiting, coordination, and talent advisory services have been trusted by the world's leading brands. Companies such as Atlassian, Microsoft, Expedia, Pinterest, Waymo, and more. Whether you're hiring across engineering, go-to-market, or G&A, Talentful has got you covered. To find out how Talentful can help you, visit talentful.com. Yeah. And so this sounds like, to do this kind of company-wide, it sounds like a really big undertaking. When thinking about this, should leaders trial this on kind of one team first, or how do you recommend, or how have you done this in your organization? Did you just kind of decide this is what we want to do? We think that this is the right path when we go out and we execute across the business, or did you trial it with some smaller teams and in smaller kind of test groups first?
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense, especially if the organization is bigger. Yeah, to really trial it first. We did it with one of the tech recruiters that we just currently hired or recently hired, and played it out and see what are the problems maybe with this approach. What is the downside of it? What are the challenges? But I would then also very much say, what we are also doing is educating the business at the same time. So we are trying to put this in hiring trainings and interviewer trainings to really get them started to internalize this skill mindset or skill set based mindset, right? Because I think it does a lot to people when they're used to their ordinary job descriptions, when they suddenly don't have any resumes to judge people on. You take away a lot of things that they're used to in order to judge talent, and it needs a lot of preparation as well. So in trainings, I would advise, I would do trial outs, and I would also work with leaders beforehand to create this buy-in. So what we are doing at the minute is we have 2 leaders from the engineering department, and they are building their, let's say, engineering competencies for different seniorities, and we help them to translate this into skills and work with them together, because this is half of the job, right? If people or leaders get comfortable in assessing the performance of their current team through a skill-based approach, then hiring might not be as difficult as it is without any prior knowledge to this.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in your organization, you're leading this from a kind of TA standpoint. Are there any other kind of significant stakeholders that you're partnering with, apart from the kind of department heads in engineering or sales or marketing? Anyone else that's been important on kind of rolling this out?
Yeah, 100%. I think to be successful in such an initiative, you need the buy-in from the VP of people or CHRO, right? You need to have the buy-in. I have a counterpart who's a director of L&D. So L&D and talent acquisition is really close to each other in certain areas. So have this understanding as well, and then really make sure that in your people team, when you do that change, you start maybe with hiring, but then really roll this out through all of the different people functions. And also what we have done is we wrote a strategic paper to say, how do we create a culture and leadership uplift in the organization? And then really already got a couple of approvals on order to say, look, when we want to do this, and if we're going to tackle this, the skill-based approach is one way to tackle this. And what is really interesting with our training, for example, we tell leaders to say, look, if you want to be part of this training and you fail this training, you don't not just attend, but we really do a certificate, like a license to hire, and then you're not allowed to hire anymore. So there are also certain consequences, right? And as a leader, you might know, right? If you cannot hire anymore, and then somebody leaves your team, how do you build this team up? How do you actually make this team successful? And then it triggers a couple of different conversations, because then it might be that in your leadership profile it says, well, unfit to hire. So let's create a area, like a learning development plan for this leader to actually get them on track and really coach them individually to get back on track on hiring. So and so many times, what I have seen is that those interview or hiring trainings, they're not taken seriously. People just sit there, they don't do any certificates at all, and they just say, "Oh, I know it all. I've done this so many times. Like, why would I dare?" Right? And so, really, also looking at the incentivizations of leaders to say, "Look, as a leader, what are my goals? What do I want to achieve? And how does this is this tied maybe to my bonus structure?" Right? Are things to think about when you really take this seriously as, hey, hiring is a priority, onboarding is a priority, developing people is a priority, retaining people is a priority. So, hey, these are the things that have a direct impact on my business, not my bonus, sorry.
Yeah. How have you found the reaction to that? Do you know, because I totally agree with the approach. I think it's a really great approach, but um, in my mind, I'm not sure how people would react to that if they get told, I failed, I can't hire anymore. Have you had any of those instances, and how do people react?
Um, Not yet, but I think from a C-level perspective, we got a great buy-in. Like people say, look, that makes sense, right? I mean, in the end of the day, without people, we are not successful, right? But then I think what you will see is, well, let's see when their beloved leaders, their directs, suddenly who play a key role in the organization, face this. Are they considered to go through with their promises to say, well, then we need to remove them, right? I think what I could see is a couple of things. One thing is, okay, if people fail but are willing to learn, then we do additional coaching sessions to get that person there, to actually go there and say, look, these are the reasons why you failed. This is something where we can make this better. And maybe then, without getting the license on the first run, additional training sessions will get them the license, right? So I think for people who are willing and who are actually motivated, but they just don't know, that is an easy fix. I think the bigger problem is if you have somebody that has a lot of power in the organization and suddenly that person fails, then how do you deal with this? How do you tackle this? But I think what we are trying to do here, since this is a shared approach, we're also a very small company, I think we will see this as an opportunity to really create impact because we know that we lacking, and as I told you before, we did this audit, there is data behind it that actually explains, look, guys, here in the certain areas of the business, we have a problem here. And if you want to achieve our goals, we need to tackle it. So we have already data that tells us that. And then if that correlates with what we see in the trainings, then it makes an obvious sense to say, look, but we have talked about this. Here's the paper. You all have signed up for this. Let's stick to this. Let's commit to what we said.
Yeah, well, excellent. And one of the things you said before was, you trialed it out within kind of TA initially. If we could take that specific example maybe and look at your own team kind of in TA as a kind of case study here, how did you go about, let's say, building this skills-based hiring for, technical recruiter, for example? Can you kind of talk through some of the steps, the kind of practical steps of building this out for that position?
Yeah, so I think first of all, if you have the different skills, let's say the DNA skills, and in this case the TA skills, it's really hard to align first on what are the TA skills actually, like what are the prioritizations. So what we did is we said assessment. So assessment, candidate assessment is one of the skills. We said TA technology, so TA tooling. Do they have experience with tooling? Do they know how that works? So that would be another. Didn't do HR tech, we really did TA tech. Then we did stakeholder management, so relationship building, building trust. How do you deal with that? How do you influence them? And then talent acquisition itself. Like, what are your skills? What are your expertise in talent acquisition? And then we combined this. And then, of course, in the beginning, you have the conversations, right? You have first interview, second interview. And then we really went into a scenario-based session, which means that I don't want people to prepare long hours of work to present something. I think it's not really fair for candidates. What I am actually aiming for to say, look, you come in here, you be sharp. We have 3 scenarios that happens on your day to day. And now what we want to see is how you solve problems. What is your thought process here, right? So we really looked into, for example, a scenario where we said, are you, for example, aware of your own biases? And where do they appear in the hiring process? And how do you then tackle them and overcome them? Or, and this was tied to the scenario of biases, then also said, look, how do you help other hiring managers or interviewers to overcome their biases? Yeah, what has worked with you, what not? I think bias is such a big topic in our day to day. And being aware of your own biases to start with this first is also self awareness, right? You kind of say, okay, look, this is maybe something I've seen. And then very much also talk about your experience of, hey, this hiring manager prefers only these universities or these degrees or these competitors, right? And how do we avoid this from happening? Yeah. And this told me a lot about, hey, how is this person actually approaching a problem? And do they understand the problem statement? Do they ask clarifying questions? Do they jump to the solutions right away? And then even when they present a little bit their solution, we are talking about 15 minutes per scenario, then we have also a Q&A afterwards to say, look, I like really your approach. What about this? What about that? If you change a scenario a little bit like that, have you encountered this or that? And then also how the way they respond to the questions, yeah, is then also telling you how in depth is this, yeah. But this helped me. We have 3 scenarios there. This really helped me to understand a little bit more their traits. They couldn't really prepare. It's their day to day. And if they have experienced something like this, then it tells me how do they react. They visually they cannot fake it, right? They need to think on the spot, and they have experience in certain areas. And then we really see, okay, is this something that makes sense? Would that work in our environment? And is it actually a good approach?
How do you, I've always found, because I think doing those kind of assessments, like problem solving assessments, is a really good way to assess recruiters. But how do you score, each of those scenarios? So what's your method? Because, again, for the person taking the interview, it might not be so objective or quantifiable. So how do you look at scoring those kind of assessments?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think it's one of the things that I think is key here when you build the skill-based hiring. So to answer your question, you have the skill, let's say, problem solving. Yeah. Then you define the skill, first of all, what does problem solving mean? Yeah. And then you work with the proficiency levels. For people who are not familiar with proficiency levels, we literally score multiple different ways of foundational, advanced, expert. Yeah. Or you could put this in a career framework where you say junior, mid-level, senior, or whatever. And so what we do then is we define per level, per seniority, or however you want to call this, then a definition. Yeah. So really take the definition and then say, as a junior, as a mid-level, as a senior, this is what we would expect. And then we build the interview questions accordingly to those proficiency levels. Yeah. So that means somebody that starts in an interview knows this is a senior person, or we assume this is a senior person. Let's just ask senior questions based on that skill base, based on that definition, and then really go further. And based on the answers, then you kind of get a sense of, okay, is that the right person that we want? Is the definition actually a fit to what I have experienced? What is an advice for me here is, in my career, what we always struggled is that we put a lot of skills in one interview. Don't do this. Maximum 4 to 5. That is enough in order to test this. And then we use also technology. For example, we are using currently MetaView that helps us to record and transcribe interviews, which then also analyzes the talk time, the way we ask those questions. And then we can also go back and say, okay, look, it might be even, because we involve human beings, that there's a certain bias in how we have perceived things, even if we have this all set up. But then again, we could go back to the recording and say, was that really true? What was assessed? Or is there maybe an assessment error? Because we can see somebody said no in problem solving, and another one comes up and it's like fantastic or great, yeah, based on that rating.
Yeah, and I guess this is where having skilled interviewers is really important to be able to assess someone under those parameters, you need to really know what you're looking for, and you need to be a really experienced or skilled interviewer. So that training and getting that license to interview, I think, makes it really important, because otherwise it's really hard to do this skills based interviewing optimally. So that makes a lot of sense. I know that you're kind of early on your journey in implementing this skills based hiring, but you had these assumptions when you put the paper out to the company. You're trying to solve certain challenges in the business, and you think that skills based hiring is a good solution. Um, what are the kinds of things that you're going to be measuring, or you think it's important to measure, to see if skills based hiring is in fact solving those challenges and actually working? What things are you looking out for now?
Yeah, it's a couple of things. I think, first of all, an obvious one, which we always tend to forget, is candidate experience, right? How people are treated. Do they are set up for success? Have they been coached in order to be successful in the interviews? And then also, do they feel like they could have shown their skills, right? I think this is something that is definitely an area where, if we are transparent with people up front as well, what are we assessing, what the approach is, but also the experience around this, that would have an immediate effect. Another effect that we, of course, look at is the quality per hire, right? So then really we are measuring after 3 months at the managers, but we will probably continue this even further, 6, 9, or 12 months, when we combine it with performance data, to say, look, what was the expectations? Sometimes we already see a bias there, because if you ask a hiring manager, well, how great of a hire was this after 3 months, they're probably going to say, yeah, I'm a great hiring manager, so of course it's going to be a great talent, right? But this is something that we keep on tracking as well. And then I think for us, it's also not so much the the immediate impact, but also very much the mid to long term impact. So, for example, as a leader, yeah, if you bring in a new leader, needs to build a new team, then you can see over the course of time, probably if you had this role before, that this leader, the way they enable people, the way they talk to the team, will then create more and more of an impact in the organization. Maybe that leader was unable to work with other departments in the organization, and clearly you see within even the first 3 to 6 months the impact of maybe a new leader that was hired as a replacement, that adds value, that actually contributes to the overall company objective, but also the way they work with their teams together. Because I think leadership these days is getting more and more complex. And to really have the right leaders, or the right emotional skills or key skills, yeah, sometimes people say, let's not talk about soft skills, because actually it says that they are not so much of importance, but they are clearly, and now people call them essential skills, which I think is a really nice way of, hey, if you want to succeed in your career, these skills are the most important one. It's at a leadership level. It's not so much more about what you know in your functional expertise, yeah. And I think there we have made a lot of mistakes, right? Because we always promoted those functional experts that were not really leaders. And this is something where you shape culture. It's the responsibility of leaders to shape culture and make them psychological safe in order to actually create high performing companies and teams.
Absolutely. Well, I'm really excited to check in with you in a year's time and see how this is working, because it sounds absolutely fascinating. Before we go, I know you're really in touch with the innovation in TA, and you're constantly looking at the new ways that we can evolve as an industry. So I'm really excited in your point of view on what are you most excited about regarding the future of TA?
I I think that the future of TA means that we probably talk about the future of talent and not talent acquisition anymore. So we will get a broader and more holistic approach to our practices. This goes hand in hand with not just hiring output, something that we are measured on, but more of coaching enabling. Yeah. So really creating an impact and an sustainable impact on how we help people to develop further and to be successful in their work. Plus, I would argue then strategic thinking, in a way of, are we actually able to do such changes like, hey, we have driven through talent acquisition a skill-led organization, and that had an effect of then an IPO, or of revenue growth, or of an exit, yeah, that was made, that transformed an okay culture into a great culture. I think these are use cases that I would love to see more, because I also believe that with the consolidation that is happening at the market and in our profession as well, that we have a unique opportunity to really fix things and course correct our maybe misperception that we have, or the way we miscommunicate over the last years on what our real value is.
Awesome. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And so, thanks a lot, Matthias. Where can people find you? Where can people find Emnify?
Yes, 100%. So Berlin, both. But yeah, we are on LinkedIn. So please, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Send me a text. I also am founding a talent called a talent acquisition community in Berlin. It's called TA Crunch Berlin. It's also a place where you should check out our events, our meetings. This is really great to get everybody together and collaborate on that. And I'm doing also sometimes podcasts or talks or conferences where I'm involved. So if you have any chance to be there or see me on stage or listen to one of the things that I have to say, then always feel free to ping me. I love to interact with you. And I also do some regularly posts on LinkedIn as well. So that's literally my go-to network.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Matthias. And if you want to hear more great episodes like this, please like and subscribe.